Hey, Luanne, how are you?
Great. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm doing well. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me today.
Good to be here.
If you could just introduce yourself, your name, and your organization and role, please.
I'm Luanne Zurlo, and I'm the executive director of the Seton Education Partners CMO, which manages the Brilla Schools Network. It's a group of charter schools in the Bronx. We're 5 elementary and middle schools, and we're growing to 10 over the next couple of years. And we're currently about 1,600 students. When we're fully grown out, we'll be about 4,000 students.
Nice. And so what led you on the path to education?
Boy, it's been a long, windy road. To go way back, my grandparents on my mother's side were immigrants, and they never had the opportunity for a formal education beyond the 8th grade. But yet they were really bright. I mean, they were big readers. And so the year I graduated from a very good university was the year they went back while they were in their 80s,
Wow.
and got their GEDs, graduated that same year. So for me, education was personal. I saw it firsthand, what the privilege I had to get such a great education and the struggles they had not having one.
Right.
Then I did a year of missionary work, if you will, in a poor town in northern Spain. And I taught at an elementary and middle school there. And so that was my first experience in the classroom. Hardest job I've ever had.
I can
Was
imagine.
teaching. It's hard work. And I ended up ultimately pursuing a career in business and finance. After about 10 years of that, and most of that time was spent working in Latin America. So I got to know the region very well. It's near and dear to my heart. And I quickly realized how poor the educational situation is in Latin America. And sadly, it's really not improved much in recent years. So I left and founded an NGO with the aim of improving education levels in Latin America. And what we primarily did was teacher and principal training, because the root of the problem was the poor quality of teaching and school leadership. And I ran that for about 12, 13 years, then taught at the university level for a few years, and then was asked by the founder of the Brilla Schools Network to come on as ED. So I had kind of a mix of background and a broad range of skills that led me here. Our schools are primarily populated with families that identify as Latino. And so Spanish is the primary language for many, if not most of our students. So it still kind of touches, if you will, a special affinity I have for the Latin cultures.
And Luanne, the role of CEO or executive director is pretty complex, right? And you are responsible for, setting the tone, the vision, the organizational culture, if you will. And so how do you go about establishing and maintaining an org culture that is people focused and centered while also incredibly results driven?
So I was blessed. I've been here for just under 5 years. I was blessed with an extraordinary culture that I walked into, and that was established by our founding team. A very people kind of centered culture. It also, what I did notice though is while we knew it in our bones, it was hard for us sometimes to articulate. So one of the first endeavors I did when I joined is we've got to codify this. Leverage Ed was extraordinarily helpful in that. But codify what we call our secret sauce. How are we so human-centered? And then what that quickly led to is we have policies and procedures and norms and traditions and all we do. But what was the root of that? What were our foundational principles that animated what we do and how we do it? And so that was an important and difficult challenge to try to put down. And then we created a 9-minute video around our foundational principles. And they're centered around our philosophy of education. Because I think for us to have such a strong culture, we all have to be on the same page or have a common understanding of why we're doing what we're doing and what does it mean to be educated.
Yeah.
And so our three foundational principles are focused on what it means to be human, because in order to understand what it means to be educated and why we're doing what we're doing, we have to understand who we're educating, the child, the person. So what is it that we understand about the human person? And so the three critical elements, how we understand the human person, is they're endowed with special dignity. We're all unique, special people. We've been endowed with free choice. We have agency. And despite challenges and difficulties and whatnot, at the core, we can make our own decisions at a basic level. And then third, there are enduring truths, and we can grapple and come to know them. Relatedly, we also strongly believe that the family is the first educator. And so we work really closely with families. We're very much work very actively in the community. Many of our families are Spanish speakers. So most of our staff are bilingual. All our operations staff are bilingual. And so that's, I think, an important element of our culture too. We've kind of embraced the broader community. It takes intention, and it's sometimes easy to let the cultural things go when you're kind of dealing with crises or urgency.
And in schools, there's no shortage of crises.
Oh my goodness, I just today, I got the number of crises just today. It's just odd, but ultimately everyone kind of knows what their role is, in that clarity of decision rights and structures really helps respond there. But I would say, during COVID, I'm not going to lie, I think we lost a little bit of the glue weakened a little bit because of how much remoteness there was. And what I found in recent months is the COVID protocols have diminished, and we're in person more. There's a richness, and I'm already seeing like kind of a change in how we interact, and just kind of a change in our ethos or our air, with us being back together more than we were during those 2 years of COVID. So that in-person contact is critical, and it has to be intentional, especially now, because many of us are, at least on the network team, and I think I see this across the board, there's more flexibility about in-person and
Sure.
remote. So what that means is, when you are in person, you have to really be thoughtful around why are you there and when are you there, because it's not going to be necessarily 5 days a week for everyone again.
Right.
So we do, to give you a sense, last night was a late night for us, because every year we have a 5-year event for our veteran staff who have been with us for 5 years. We do this really special dinner where they bring guests. It was this incredibly great, well-known chef that cooked for us. Our board came, and we give little speeches highlighting, their specialness to our organization. And so that's just one of many kind of things that we really try to celebrate our people.
Yeah. And Luanne, so in your role, and also your school leaders, how do you approach big decisions in your organization? You mentioned the pillars upon which your schools are built, and sort of that thoughtfulness goes into just how you operate on a whole. Besides those pillars, sort of how do you approach decision making, and how do you avoid, especially with folks being virtual and not virtual, sort of this, inevitable game of telephone that happens, and sort of translation of those decisions into action?
First of all, I'll say I've made, and we continue to make mistakes, but in general, what we tend to be a collaborative organization. We're pretty flat organizational structure. And I think it also stems from our roots, where we were a tiny little team. We were only a couple of us, and now our network team is just over 30 folks. So we've kind of retained that sense of collaboration around decisions. And as we all know, decisions have such a broad array of implications. Any little thing, you pull it and it just touches so much else. And when we've made decisions in isolation, we've come to regret them often, because either they didn't reflect the reality on the ground, or alternatively, they didn't get the buy-in. And so they weren't executed well.
Yeah.
So what, you mentioned the phone tag. I call it, for us, it's kind of email tag. Like once today I was on an email chain. There's probably been 20 back and forth with about 8 people around an important decision. And it's kind of this peel the onion iterative. Everyone gets their thing in. It's kind of a pain, but in the end of the day, I think we've created buy-in, and we've kind of circled around all the implications. And then, generally we come to consensus. But if there's not a consensus, it goes up the appropriate hierarchy. And then ultimately I'm trying to remember if I've had to make a decision that goes counter to what the general consensus was. And generally not. I mean, there's been some hard decisions.
Right, absolutely.
There were probably a few, but at least people felt heard, and they understood kind of where the thinking came from. We can do, as you grow, you're always kind of recutting up the pie, if you will. So your pieces tend to get smaller, and it's sometimes hard to have a mindset of, nope, I have to stay in this more narrower lane. So we have those issues, frankly.
Sure.
And then when new people come on, but that's where the culture comes in. You just, we have a few, like a handful of norms, and one of our norms is principle over preference, and another norm is honor the team, and another norm is assume the best of others. And like those are important. They really we repeat them often. And I think in the end, I think that assuming the best of others is probably one of the most critical operating mindsets, because it's so easy to not, and especially if you don't fully understand the context.
Yes.
I've done it myself, and I've seen it happen
we're
so
all
many
guilty.
times where, so.
Yeah, and Luanne, I kind of want to go back to a point you made earlier about lessons learned and your own learning within this space. All of us are always learning. You mentioned, this idea of what it means to be educated, and you mentioned as well, and not, in a more subtle way, that learning is just continuous and always happens. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned about the state of education during the pandemic? Not necessarily to your organization, but the education sector on a whole.
I would say everyone is an expert, but few people really understand what it's really like in the trenches, unless you're in the trenches. And education, obviously, in the last couple of years has taken on it's become a national, discussion and topic. And it's incredibly, it's become a polarized topic as well.
Absolutely.
What I would say is, it's really hard work, and it's the challenges with some of our underserved populations are so broad and widespread that it necessarily is a holistic endeavor, because these kids are dealing with so much on so many levels. Obviously, COVID brought out a number. We were in the Bronx, we were ground zero, and we're very much impacted by COVID. We've had, just 2 weeks ago, we had a death of one of our students due to an illness. And it's just these things, it's just so sad. And so you really, what did I learn? I learned that it's much more complex and harder than I ever dreamed. It confirmed something I think a lot of us know and believe, and that is, at the core, probably the most critical element or factor in a good education is the teacher. And it's really hard to get a lot of good teachers, because the labor market's gotten tougher. It's a really tough job. So the tenure of a teacher, particularly in the charter sector, is relatively short.
Yeah, 47 million people left their jobs last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, much of our job really is is human resources and talent acquisition, and then training. And that's a critical element to the work. Yeah, I guess I could probably stop there, apart from saying that it's harder than I think a lot of people appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, and we appreciate that sentiment, certainly. And my last question, Luanne, you mentioned that, the folks in the trenches, I mean, you said it, but not really said it, but there are heroes, right? I mean, our teachers, people who are in schools, people who are supporting the work of schooling, people who are immersed in this experience every single day, are the ones who are making incredible sort of strides toward providing kids with a better opportunity and with a more robust education. But what does it mean then to be an effective school leader?
It's interesting because we've actually evolved a little bit our thinking around that. We tended to view the school leader or the principal as, well, first of all, let me just say they are the most important person in the organization. The leader sets the tone and is core to that school on so many levels. And as we know, delivering a really good education, particularly ours, where we're very holistic, mind, body, and spirit. We have virtue formation is a cornerstone of our work.
Right.
Fine and applied arts, in the after school program. So it takes a lot of operational and other kind of supports. And whereas before we would view the principal as kind of the generalist overseeing it all, we've now narrowed, because we found that it's just too much for one person. And we've narrowed that role to concentrate even more on the educational outcomes, the holistic educational outcomes of the student, and have raised the level of our operations work, because that's also really tough. And so what is for now at Brilla, and I would say probably at all, if not most charter schools, what it takes to be a really good leader at a school is they are the instructional cornerstone. They are the instructional academic leader of that school. So what does that mean? You have to hire good talent. You have to be willing to train the young ones. You have to be willing to train them up well, support them through their career, provide an environment that's conducive to teaching clearly, but also to create that culture such that the teachers stay. It's a lot. We have high numbers of students with disabilities and high multi-language learners. And so you've got those kind of elements that as a leader, you have to really understand and manage well as well. So what does it take? It takes a lot, but at a core, you're an academic instructional leader.
Luanne, thank you. This has been very insightful. It's particularly interesting to me the way in which you and your organization have been able to really honor this idea of being human, right, first, and doesn't sort of discredit the way that you manage. It doesn't change the accountability that people feel. It also doesn't change their pursuit of excellent results. And I think so many people can learn from doing both really, really well. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you for Leveraged Ed. Your team has been a godsend to us. So I'm really appreciative.
It's been so great working with you guys.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.